Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
Hi, this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Today is June 3rd, 2020, and this has been a challenging year, and it continues with its challenges, with its uncertainty, with its anger, with its frustration, with all the challenging feelings we could possibly experience, it seems. We started the year on an economic high note. Things seemed like they were going to be going smoothly, at least economically. There was full employment for most people in this country, in the United States. And there seemed to be a growing sense of economic well-being across all communities, all people. And then the pandemic hit. And we struggled as a country to try to understand how to manage the pandemic. It was a virus unlike any we'd seen before, and we simply didn't know how to respond appropriately. We had some false steps, missteps with testing, missteps with understanding how serious the nature of the virus was. And finally, we had a lot of different attempts at leadership, again, with some outstanding efforts, showing up with ships outside of Los Angeles and New York City to help, to support people who got the virus, or in some cases, hospitals who took in people with the virus so that other patients could go on these floating ship hospitals. There was a hospital built in the Javits Center in record time by military personnel. There was an attempt by companies to partner with the government to build all kinds of equipment to protect providers of essential services, whether in our healthcare facilities or in our grocery stores, or in our deliveries of mail and other packages. There's been all kinds of unique and amazing efforts. And at the same time, we've really struggled with the whole concept of knowing how to behave, how to react, how to manage our own frustrations when we were told to socially isolate. Especially for the elderly, the most vulnerable, in fact, in our society have been hurt the most. So not only did the elderly in nursing homes and other assisted living facilities suffer the most deaths and illness, but also our minorities, our poorest populations, seem to be the most vulnerable. So many people did the best they could, isolating themselves, keeping themselves from going to stores, making sure that they just maintained close contact with those they live with and kept at least 6 feet apart from others. And then we had governors in different states do what they thought was right in terms of keeping people from congregating, from going into businesses where they felt like the exposure to other people might burden our hospitals in a way that would tax them so that people would be dying in immense numbers. It didn't happen, but scared us quite a bit. And at least 100,000 people did actually die, at least in this country. And so this pandemic was all consuming, it seemed. And then we saw the horrific video the other day of a white police officer with his knee on a black man's carotid artery on his neck, and watched the man suffer and then die. And emotions exploded all around the country and the world because we've been here before. We've seen this movie. We've seen this picture of police brutality. So we protested. Lots of people went out and protested. And while the protests alleviated some of the angst that caused people to feel like, I've got to do something. I can't just watch something like this and not respond. But we put ourselves even in more danger, I believe, by protesting without masks, side by side with other people, exposing ourselves to more possibilities for infection and contamination, and again, overtaxing our hospitals. So what to do? How do we understand what's the best way to respond? And what do we do about the people who go beyond the protest, the peaceful protest, the outraged concern for others that most of us share? And we see people looting, and we see people burning down businesses, the businesses that small business owners dreamed of creating, but burning down other, even larger stores where people who were just getting back to work and feeling like they were just about to return to some form of normalcy had that stripped away. Some of you, like me, probably had friends that were very closely monitoring the situation because the actual activities and the looting and burning and protesting were just outside of where they lived. And so there's that fear as well. Are you safe even in your own home? We saw people, some officers, and we know Black Lives Matter. I believe everyone should, if they haven't already accepted Black Lives Matter. But is it just the Black life of George Floyd? Or what about the Black officers who have been impacted, shot down, some killed, some injured? We're concerned about all these people. I remember in previous times, we started to say, but shouldn't all lives matter? And I think most of us recognize, of course, all lives matter. The focus on Black lives is critical because this racial injustice, the systemic racism that's impacted our country seemingly forever, still exists, still needs to be rooted out, still needs to be dealt with. It seems as though we want to do better as a country. We say a lot of the right things when we're trying to fix something that's obviously just happened that we're all upset about. And then our passion dies down and it's not sustainable. There is something that did actually take place in the Senate. I heard Senator Amy Klobuchar talking about it today on NPR, where she said that she's introduced a bill to look at a systemic way to approach finding out how we can best address the issues that continue with us over time to show up in our communities. I read a piece in the Harvard Gazette this morning by a dean of one of the Harvard colleges who was talking about the history of racism in this country and how we've dealt with race and police brutality, starting all the way back with slavery, and some of the issues that are in place still today that are not necessarily things that we all know about and yet still exist. I think it's broader in the sense that we define ourselves as tribal in many ways. I remember many years ago being at a Harvard classroom when a guest speaker from Yale came in. Clayton Alderhofer was his name, and he talked about how we define ourselves as who is most like us. We form community around those that we consider to have the same, perhaps skin color, perhaps race and religion, perhaps in these days, the same political beliefs. We tend to congregate with those most like us. And we consider anyone outside of that initial group to be the other. To what degree they're the other depends on how we are raised, what our beliefs are, what we've been taught, what we've experienced, and what we see and read and hear about. So, for instance, if you feel as though you are someone who is raised with the idea that all of us are equal, all of us deserve equal justice, all of us demand that we treat one another with respect and caring and concern, I think perhaps maybe you're a bit unusual, because most of us have been raised with be in touch with who you are, know who you are, know who is with you, who is on your side, who is part of your team, your tribe. Identify with those because they'll protect you, and be wary of the other, whoever the other is. Clayton Alderhofer explained it in terms that just made some sense to me. And there was a video exercise years ago where it was a bunch of X's on the screen and one O. X's and O's, like a tic-tac-toe game, right? X's and O's, but there were 7 or 8 X's, I forget the exact number, and one O. And the board that you watched, as you watched the screen, had no words on it. It just showed the X's moving off on their own, leaving the O alone. The X's surrounding the O. And it asks you in these different movements, how do you think the X's are feeling? How do you think the O is feeling? And you got from that simple exercise how we look at the O as different when we're part of the X's, or how the O might feel if we found ourselves identifying with the O. Because despite the fact you might be white, those of you who are listening to this, you might be white, you might still have felt like an O at different times. You might have been in a community of minority, where the minority of people were of color, and you felt like the O. You might have been a different religion than the O. You might have been the lone Republican in a group of Democrats, or the lone Democrat in a group of Republicans. You might have felt like the O despite your skin color, or because of your skin color, or because of your religion or beliefs. Isn't it time for all of us to examine internally our own biases, our own prejudices, and to listen to those who feel most aggrieved? At this point, I think the focus on police brutality makes some sense, but I also want to caution that because a police officer does something horrible, or several police officers do something horrible, that doesn't denigrate the entire world of law enforcement. I'm sure some of you know police officers, some of you are police officers or in the world of law enforcement, and you know that there are bad actors, but you also know that there are so many others who have joined to protect people, to serve a community in a way that protects and keeps people safe. It keeps the peace in towns, locally, in states, and all across the country, in countries. So when you think about this, I'd like to share with you some of the words from President Obama, who spoke the other day. And one of the gifts President Obama has is at times he has been, as you all know, extremely eloquent. So let me share a bit about what President Obama wrote. I won't share it all, but I did capture a couple of thoughts I thought were really important. He titled it, "How to Make This Moment the Turning Point for Real Change." Yeah, this was Barack Obama on June 1st. As millions of people across the country take to the streets and raise their voices in response to the killing of George Floyd and the ongoing problem of unequal justice, many people have reached out asking how we can sustain momentum to bring about real change. If we want our criminal justice system and American society at large to operate on a higher ethical code, then we have to model that code ourselves. We have to be the models. We have to be the people that we want to see in our country. Aspirations have to be translated into specific laws and institutional practices. And that, I believe, is the bill Amy Klobuchar introduced in the Senate. I hope the House and other senators pass the bill quickly and the president signs it. And in a democracy, that only happens when we elect government officials who are responsive to our demands. We have to organize and cast our ballots to make sure that we elect candidates who will act on reform. So let's watch and see. I know I'm talking about President Obama, but I'm also adding my own words to this. Let's watch and see who actually acts on what they need to act on in order to make the country move forward, so we aren't in the same place again in just a few years. More from a President Obama. If going forward we can channel our justifiable anger into peaceful, sustained, and effective action, then this moment can be a real turning point in our nation's long journey to live up to our highest ideals. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great if something really happened that made the kind of systemic issues that we face that caused this to happen over the years repeatedly at different points in time? Wouldn't it be great if we actually tackled it and did something meaningful on a federal, on a state, on a local level, and even more importantly, in our own hearts and minds? One of the groups I support is a group called No Labels. They engage in bipartisanship and they try to create the best kind of problem solving that this country can do by working across the aisle and using everybody's best ideas in a way that's civil and respectful and understands that the diversity of thinking as well as the diversity of people can really lend itself to the best possible creativity and innovative solutions. I'd also like to read to you something from Harvard Business Review, because I think a lot of you are in businesses and are leaders in different ways in your community or in organizations, whether for profit or not. And I'd like to just share with you what I thought was really something I thought would be very helpful to business leaders from Harvard Business Review's tips for the day. Today's tip: take meaningful action against racism. If you're a business leader in the United States, no matter your ethnic or political identity, you have an opportunity to speak up and take meaningful action against racism right now. Of course, no one leader's language can fix the deep-seated systemic racial injustice in America, but the right words can be a salve for the widespread pain that so many are experiencing. And it can set the conditions for an action-oriented culture. If you are a leader who is not Black, don't approach statements or conversations about racism with a defensive mindset. Don't make sweeping generalizations about people's feelings, words, or actions. And crucially, don't rely on your Black and brown colleagues to educate you on the news of social justice initiatives. Acknowledge what you don't know. Commit to listening, really listening, and learning. And pledge to use your position of power to affect change. Do the research to understand current events using data from reliable sources. Give your Black and brown employees the space to be angry, afraid, disenchanted, or even disengaged from work. Seek out support and reading materials from your human resources team or Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Create space for continued reflection, discussion, and vulnerability by making it clear that you care and are available. Finally, take meaningful action. Make a strong public statement. Donate to Black-owned businesses and social justice causes in your community. Form a committee on racial justice and reform. There are countless ways to build a better future. Find a few that align with your organization and make a commitment to them. Racism isn't just Black people's problem, and inaction is a tacit endorsement of the status quo. Now, you might not agree with all of that. You might feel it's superfluous. It's not exactly the action that you need to be taking right now. I found the words encouraging and thoughtful. I've seen some words. My daughter works at a company called Voya. I saw the chief executive of Voya's statement to all employees, and I thought, again, it resonated with me, but I'm not a Black person. I don't know what it feels like to be Black in this country. But I am listening. I am listening to lots of people and what their experiences are telling me about how frustrating and scary it is for them at times when they're confronted by a police officer and they're uncertain what's going to happen. So I think all of us will have ideas. Most of us will like. No one's going to like everybody's idea. No one's going to agree what the right answers are. But I encourage you to understand the concept of being creative, being open-minded, being thoughtful and aware of our own intentions, of our own behaviors, and of our own beliefs. If we can rise above our differences and welcome our differences, whether they be race, religion, beliefs, whatever they might be, and embrace our diversity in every possible way, I think we're all better for it. We create a level of harmony. We stop the noise and dissonance, and we support one another because we care. We legitimately care. We're empathically concerned about one another, not just ourselves and who might be in our specific small tribe. But we look at all of us as a human race, not just as Americans, not just as white or Black or other minorities. We are all humans. We share a planet. We have a responsibility to ourselves, to each other, to our families, to our planet. Sometimes we think small, like who's in my house that I have to protect? Today, these times with the pandemic, police brutality, visually confronting us, the reality of what we all saw. We have to think globally and largely and big picture and understand that we all are part of the solution. We all need to engage here. I also encourage you to think that more broadly, it isn't just about how Black people might be feeling. There are people who are religions that feel persecuted. In certain countries, Christians are persecuted. Around the world, Jews have been persecuted. Some of you may know this. Anti-Semitic are the highest forms, the largest number of hate crimes in America today are not against Muslims, are not against Blacks, they're against Jewish people. There are people who are Muslim who have been frightened by the aspect of people thinking at one point that Muslims, and particularly Arab Muslims, are all terrorists because of how we all felt, I say all, after the horrible events of 9/11. When someone who is a part of a tribe acts out, does something awful, like the police officer did in Minneapolis, that doesn't mean the entire group of law enforcement officials are the enemy. If someone who is Christian or Jewish or Muslim is a bad actor, that person is a bad actor, but that doesn't condemn the race or religion of all people to which party or tribe that person or people belong. We need to think more broadly about tribes in the sense that we're all one tribe and that we all need to be caring about each other. Can you, John Lennon, right? The song Imagine. Can you imagine? I love that song because of what it said. I'm proud of my own religion, but I love the idea of being part of something bigger, something where the entire planet feels like we're all in this together. We all care about whether it's the climate, fossil fuels, Black Lives Matter, stopping pandemics, wars against different countries, territorial disputes around the world. There's so many things that grab our attention, and yet we're consumed most of the time by just our daily events. What's on our calendars today? How do I get to all the things that I'm responsible for? Get my bills paid, make sure my commitments to my job and profession are met, make sure that I take care of the children I have, my spouse, my partner. I need to be responsible for so many things. Where is the time for being more concerned about others? And which others? Do I just focus on my own town, on my own religious group, on my own club or sports team or workplace? Where do I spend my time? No one can answer that for anybody else, but I can say that I think you'll find a way of dealing with these upset, frustrating, intense anger, depression that so many people are feeling today, including myself, around some of these issues, that when you reach out and do for others, when you take the time, find the time, make the time to simply reach out to others and do something that's kind, that's caring, that's concerned, that demonstrates empathy and real responsibility for others, for the zero or the O in the little chart. When you realize that when it feels great to you, it's probably because you're with a bunch of X's that sort of feels like home to you. But when we have to, I think more broadly, that whether it's X's and O's or T's or Z's or M's, there's a lot of us that are different from each other in so many ways. And yet the similarities are, we all care, we all love, we all are guilty at times of making mistakes and doing the wrong thing. We all fail at times. You know, it's interesting. Sometimes what's important isn't when we get knocked down. We got knocked down as a country a couple of times this year, when the pandemic hit us and when we saw that horrible killing of George Floyd. It was a killing, a murder. We saw that happen. We failed as a country, as a nation, as a community. And part of that upset is that it isn't just that event that happened, it's that somehow we didn't do the right things all the way along the way. But instead of punishing ourselves, we need to think about, how do we learn from any mistake, any failure, any misstep, especially the big ones? How do we learn from those and grow in a way that we're better next time? How do we do that? I think you got to ask yourself, what is it that you've seen in your own life where you've taken a failure, a misstep, a mistake, maybe a big one, and instead of letting it knock you down and depressing you for a great length of time, you got back up and you did something about it. You got back up and you tackled it with a brave sense of purpose and energy to make things better next time. I think we need that today. We need to find a way to make things better next time. Now, will there never be another shooting like that, a shooting or police brutality, or will we never have a prejudice again? I mean, we always will be flawed. That's part of the human condition. We are flawed. None of us are perfect. But the search for perfection, the striving to do the right thing, to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, not only for ourselves, but to be models for our children, to give our children the world we want them to live in. Don't we have to act now? Don't we have to do the things that matter most? Seems to me that's pretty important. I'd like to share with you a poem I created the other day. I was up late watching the news. I was watching the protest. The video was on a bunch of times, and I watched that and the second video of what happened in Minneapolis. But I also saw all the videos of people destroying other people's properties. And I thought, oh my God. And then I saw people protesting legitimately, protesting with fervor and righteousness and conscience, but standing beside one another, hugging one another, not wearing masks, shouting at each other, getting in each other's faces. How does that not increase the epidemic, the pandemic? And that scares me too. So how can we be more responsible? How can we make sure we're doing the right things that matter? Peaceful protest is fine. If you're going to protest, I suggest that you try to maintain some kind of social distance if you can, not just to protect yourself, but if you come back contagious, you know the story. We've all heard it a number of times now. We bring it back into our households. If we have aging parents, people in their 60s or older, those are the people that get hurt the most. If we're in urban centers where we have poor conditions that we're living in, and we're of a minority group, those people, your other people that you live with, those are the people that are being impacted the most by this pandemic. So be thoughtful, be sensitive, be responsible in your protest. But take action. Don't just go out into the streets. Look to see who, there's an election coming up. Look to see who is going to be the kind of candidate that's going to work with people of all kinds to make the world, the nation, the country, your state, your local township a better place, a healthier place, a safer place. Get involved. Don't just march for a few days and think you're done. Don't just feel badly. Take responsible actions to feel empowered, because it feels powerless. I thought to myself, over the years, I've been in a few situations where I had the opportunity to save a few people's lives. I remember the first time it happened, I was driving on a highway in Massachusetts on my way to a wedding, actually, and my wife and I were in the car together, and a car in front of us spun out of control, hit a guardrail. This was on a highway, remember, it was going pretty fast, and they were in the passing lane, and all the traffic stopped slowed down anyway, and the car spun out and banged into a guardrail, smashed the front end in, and it burst into flames. And I was a few cars behind, and I could see that. And without thinking, I stopped and pulled up behind that car. And I said to my wife, I got to get those people out. That car might explode. I jumped out of my car. I looked to see if other cars were coming so I didn't get killed. But I opened the door that was jammed shut, and with myself and the person on the inside pushing, we were able to get that door open. I pulled two people out, and then the motor exploded. And we waited for police to come, and the people were okay. I also was swimming in Hawaii one time, and a person was swimming out to a sandbar, same one I had just swum to, and I was starting to swim back from the sandbar, and a person yelled, "Help, help." And at first I thought he was kidding, but he actually was drowning. And I'd gone to lifeguard training school as a young person. I was a good swimmer, strong swimmer. And I caught up to him and I said, "I can save you." And I tried to grab him and he fought with me, but because of what I had learned in lifeguard training, I was able to get behind him and cup under his neck and grab him around the chest. And I said, "I've got you now. I've got you now. Stop fighting me so I can pull you to safety." And he relaxed and I was able to pull him in. And one other time I saw a fire start where there were gas-powered machines. And those chances of explosion seemed very likely to me. And there were kids sleeping. It was at a camp. And there were kids in a camp, log cabins and campground, just sleeping nearby. And I thought, people might die here. And I ran in with a blanket and snuffed out the fire. And so I thought to myself, if I was in Minneapolis At the time, I saw somebody with his knee on that man's neck, and I knew that pressure on that neck that way could kill a man. Would I have tried to stop it? And I realized that if anyone had tried to stop that person, that was a civilian on the outside looking in, that officer or another officer might have shot him. I'll put him in handcuffs, take him away. I think the only person that could have stopped him would have been another police officer. And honestly, they seemed somewhat unconcerned, didn't they? So something has to change around that, right? Something has to change so people aren't frightened or afraid that if they try to intervene to save somebody, that somehow that's going to be a bad thing. We can't be afraid to stand up to injustice. But our rules, our laws, our policies, our police training need to reflect that other police officers can't allow that to happen. They can't allow that to happen. All three of the other officers should have worked together to stop that person, talking to him at first and then just pulling him off if he refused to get off. And if not, there should be laws that hold people accountable. Because we have to trust our law enforcement officers. Our system breaks down when there's a lack of trust in the people in power who have weapons, who decide who's a criminal and who goes in front of a court and who might go to jail. We have to have trust in those systems and those people. So what can I do? What can you do to get involved in our elections? What can we do with the existing elected officials? If you like what Amy Klobuchar did, and I only heard about it today, so I can't say I've seen the law, but I heard her talk about it. And honestly, I think she makes a lot of sense, and she's a pretty reasonable person, at least in my opinion. Not everybody thinks so, I get that. But take a look at that law. And if you think it's not quite right, work to change it. But if you like it, call your legislator, call our senators in Connecticut, call your senator wherever you might be listening, and ask them to support it and get your House representative to support it as well. And then contact the president, ask for his support also. I know there are people that are pro and anti senators, representatives, the president. I mean, we all have very strong opinions these days about our elected officials, it seems. But I think all of us and all of them are capable of doing the right thing. Sometimes they don't always know what the right thing is, so sometimes we've got to educate them. I think we need to hold ourselves accountable, not just them. This isn't about somebody else. It's about each of us stepping up and doing the right thing. So I'd like to read you my poem. So here's my poem. It starts with a little bit of prose. It's so hard to know what to say when we are experiencing an invisible enemy. The virus attacking our most vulnerable, a white officer responsible for a black man dying, and legitimate protest intermingled with anarchists and opportunists. It is emotionally overwhelming. I wrote a poem that might be helpful. It is a simple verse with a hopefully appealing message that pulls us together rather than pushes us further apart. I titled the poem, When the Sun Comes Up Tomorrow. How sad to see anarchy. How sad to see police brutality. I am white and will never know what it feels like to be black. But I know what it means to have someone's back. Let's commit to creating the world we want to live in, the one we want to leave to our children. When we see injustice and others despairing, be respectful, civil, and empathically caring. Be strong when you see something wrong. Work with others to make the changes we need to see. Look to cooperate even when you disagree. There are many changes we need to make. All of us working together is what it will take. So when the sun comes up tomorrow, Let's begin working together to end our sorrow. As we begin to find our way, let's commit to making it a better day. So I hope you found the poem useful and helpful. It's my intent to try and use this time on my radio show to give people a little bit of clarity around what's happening and why, and a little bit of hope for directions that we might all engage in that makes the world a better place. My show, The Emotion Roadmap, take the wheel and control how you feel. It's about helping people find inner peace. And at the same time you find inner peace, I'm hoping it leads to world peace. I have big aspirations. I'd like to see people with this idea of thinking about how they're feeling. Right now, people are upset, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're enraged. That's how we are feeling. And those are appropriate responses, I think, to the pandemic, to the missteps, the mistakes made in trying to find a vaccine, a cure, deal with patients, find the right equipment to protect people, social isolation. All that is enormously overwhelming. So is this outrageous scene that we all saw and experienced of this poor man, George Floyd, losing his life in the way that he did. So while we're feeling all those things and they're appropriate, we want to act on them. We want to use that energy that's coming from these really, really challenging feelings to drive equal opportunity, social justice, real change that matters, that makes a difference, that's meaningful. We want to have real change that really causes us to feel differently, so that things like this never happen again. But if they do happen again, it's the rarity. It's not something that we assume when it happens that nothing's really changed. I think things have changed. I think we have grown. I think we are better. But when something happens, like what we saw in Minneapolis, it all seems to go back to like, has nothing changed? Are we no better? Are we simply the same version of ourselves that we've always been? Is nothing different? I saw a poll on TV the other day about race relations. This was just yesterday, I guess. And do you realize, I mean, this is kind of amazing to me, that people feel the same way about race relations today as they did when the President Obama's administration ended. I thought that's curious. Now, this just happened, and maybe the poll came right after this. I don't know when the poll was taken, and maybe it's not meaningful. What is meaningful? What is truly meaningful on polls? It's really what goes on inside each of us. You know I have my own prejudices, and I've worked hard to overcome them. I know I grew up with messages that came from my parents and their parents, and my community and my tribal members about protect the tribe. I know others have had similar messages. I remember, I'm just thinking of some of my own personal experiences with some of these things. Trying to be friendly with certain people at times when their group, their tribe didn't allow them to be friendly with me. I talked earlier about that little exercise where there was a bunch of X's and one single O, and how it felt to be the O. That was the time I felt like the O. There have been other times as well. So whether you're feeling like an O or an X, part of the majority, part of the minority, what can we all do to feel like we're all part of the same human race, where we embrace what's similar about us and we value what's different? We understand that diversity, again, of all types, leads to more creativity, more innovation, makes life more exciting, more interesting, more engaging if we let it. If we keep out any ideas, any people, any thoughts that are different than what we already know, we live in something like an echo chamber where we just hear our own voices shouting back at us. So see what you can learn, see what you can do, embrace the opportunity that's in front of us to make sustainable, lasting change. People are angry. Anger needs to calm down somewhat for rational planning to take place, but anger about injustice is an appropriate feeling, and it should fuel corrections. It should fuel attempts to make life better. In my show, over the years, I hope that those of you who are regular listeners know what I mean when I say an emotion roadmap works like this. First of all, you identify what is. So who are all the people involved and how is each key person feeling? In this case, the key people are each of us as individuals. There's a lot of us, but I think we have to focus on ourselves. We have to focus on ourselves to the extent that we want to deal with what we can control, and that's what our own prejudices are. We want to make sure that our anger and sense of injustice is sustainable, that we don't just turn away when the anger is past. We just go back to our daily practices and our everyday business. We want to do something. We want to commit to making the world a better place and doing our part, however small or large that is. We need to do something that we feel is going to make a difference. And why do we do that? Because we want to feel differently at the end, don't we? The use of emotion is what's ideal to feel in this circumstance. So right now, anger is an ideal feeling for driving some action. And that needs to be replaced with sort of a compassion and engagement, where we are now channeling our energy to do something so that we don't just keep repeating what just happened. We want to do something that makes it better. We want to do something where we are involved and engaged and compassionate in what we are doing that makes it better. I don't know what that is for you. I'm working on that for me. I find that this group I belong to, called No Labels, is one where I really find that there's some opportunity to work with a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus, 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans, who are working in a way that they have pledged to support legislation that puts country over party. And what I mean by that is if 75% of that group of 50 people agree on a piece of legislation, and at least 50% of the Republicans and 50% of the Democrats agree with that legislation, they will vote for it even if it is against their party, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party's wishes. They will vote and support that legislation. They are really, really believers in solving problems, and they are tired of the party dominating what's right and what's wrong and all the name calling and disrespect that's happening so frequently most of the time. So if we're going to get something done, I think the Problem Solvers Caucus is the way to make it happen. I hope that there are more than 50. I hope there's 150, within a year or two, of Democrats and Republicans. They have to come in as partners. You can't come in as a single Democrat. You have to come in with a Republican partner. Vice versa, if you're a Republican, you have to come in with a Democratic partner. That's just my way of trying to address what's happening. You may find it helpful to think about that. If you're interested and you want to know more about it, you can contact me. We're trying to grow the No Labels group in Connecticut. And in other places, there are people in every state who are championing No Labels in your state. We can find out who it is that you can contact if you want to just get in touch with me, if that sounds appealing to you. The Problem Solvers Caucus has actually moved to do more than just work in the House now. They're having bicameral meetings, which is that they're meeting with senators now too. In fact, something called the SMART Act is what they believe is the best way to approach any additional funding to help support all our efforts to bring this country back from the brink of collapse that the pandemic engendered when it shut down so many of our businesses. You can find out more about that by going online or contacting me. So there's a lot of things I think that you can do from my vantage point that I'm doing that I feel like make a difference. I also think my radio show helps. I hope it does. I hope you're finding this helpful. But it also is about trying to understand how this roadmap works. So it's first, what are you feeling? Anger and depression. What do you want to feel? Compassionate, concerned, engaged, and helpful. Those are all the feelings I want to feel. And how do you get there? How do you get there? So for me today, it was making this video, making this recording so that people could see it in the hometown where I live. And also for those of you who are listening to it from the radio show that I do twice a month. I do the emotion roadmap, take the wheel and control how you feel, twice a month, the first and second Wednesday of each month from 12 noon to 1 p.m. Usually have callers call in. Today I might have had people calling in, but I haven't been able to go to the studio because I'm in that age group that needs to be isolated. And so I'm trying to stay isolated. So I've been doing more of these kind of recordings in my home studio. So as you're listening to me, I hope that you're getting some ideas, some notions, things that you can do that lend themselves to making you feel better, not just to get past this horrible moment in time where we're all challenged, but actually feel better because you feel like you're doing something to make life better, not just for yourselves, but for others as well. So however you do it, however you define it, whatever you think that you can do, that's a kindness, that's compassionate, that's caring, do it. Feel better. Feel like you're making a difference. And I think you'll find yourself moving away from some of the anger, not because it's just passing and you're exhausted from it, but you'll move away from it because you feel like you're addressing it. And you'll feel good about yourself. Maybe do it with others. I'm sure you've got friends and family who are just as upset as you are. And that frustration and anger kind of die down, but they don't really go away unless you feel engaged in doing something that matters, that makes a difference, that feels special. So that's what I'm hoping happens for you today. I hope that you find that there's some way that you can actually do something constructive and feel like the world's a better place because of it. And in my own religion, I know that, well, I shouldn't say I know. In my own religion, it says that if you are able to help or change one person, you've saved the world. So if I've helped or saved one person today who might be listening to that, that feels good for today. But I'm going to do something tomorrow too, because I want to work at this every day, because I hold myself accountable, as well as my elected officials and others who are supposed to do things the right way. And when they don't, we've got to find some way to correct that and hold them accountable. Sometimes it's systemic. Racism has been with us a long time. It's not going away tomorrow or the next day. But we can keep working at it. We can keep working at making it better. We can keep working at recognizing our own prejudices, not just blaming somebody else, but recognizing when it pops up in us, where it comes from, why it's there, and how to get rid of it, how to move on from it, how to be better than that, because we can be. The interesting thing about the idea of taking the wheel and controlling how you feel is that you can help to change other people's feelings. I hope I've changed some of yours today. But the person that we have the most control over is our own selves. And so, is there something you can do to make you feel better today, tomorrow, next week? What can you do for others that at the same time makes you feel better about you? So that's my show. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be with you next week. Actually had a different show I was going to do, but next week I have another show for you, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. Again, I'm Chuck Wolf. You've been listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And the show is The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Thanks for listening, everybody. And be safe, be well, and do what you can to make the place that we all live in a better place because of you. Thanks and goodbye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.